Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and we have a couple of show notes, but how exciting is this? Here we are for Week 1 rankings for the NFL season for fantasy football, and I'm absolutely excited. I have a couple of show notes to talk about. First of all, over on the left-hand side, of course, we will be going through my tight end rankings as the video said. I'm going through the top 18 tight ends in my rankings, but you can find my complete rankings, which is, I believe, right now, 35 tight ends, up on the website, www.theffforge.com. There's a link down in the description. There's a link the website is just below me as well if you did not catch that. Right now, you are not seeing this week's projections. This is what my projections and my rankings looked like last season. But first of all, as I said, the word projections, I'm not doing projections for the first 3 weeks of the season. I need some data points to work on. I want data points from this season. I don't want to just go based off of previous stuff as we do with our rankings for the offseason. I want to start looking forward. So I will just be doing my rankings kind of free form without any input from my projections for these first 3 weeks. A little bit of a difference if you were with me last season, and for those that are new, I will have floor and ceiling projections. I will be separating those from my expected range, the expected outcome of a week for each player, just to keep that as a separate thing because it is a separate thing. And for those who aren't aware with it, this is the expected floor, the expected ceiling of players in any given week. And what I like about this tool is it can help you make a decision based on maybe what you need for your team. Are you playing from behind that week, essentially, and you might need a Hail Mary tight end to put into your lineup, or you think you're safe, you just don't want a goose egg, so you want to get a high floor kind of guy. That's the chart that you're going to want to look at. So I will explain this stuff once we get to my week 4 rankings. It will be looking a little bit different this season. A couple more quick items. I was curious if you would be interested in a live show, a live stream on Friday evenings, Friday nights, where you could help me set my lineup for my home league. I will pose my questions for this week at the end of this video, and B, I would cover any updated news items then on Friday night while we just talk. That's kind of the third item. We could just talk about football, talk about DFS lineup stuff, wherever the conversation goes in that live stream. Will be cool. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. And number 4, as a reminder, I will go live 1 hour prior to kickoff on Sundays, so that would be 12 p.m. Eastern, for any and all of your start-sit questions. And I also keep up a news feed for any last-second news items that may be coming through. But let's get right on into the tight end rankings for Week 1 of the fantasy football season. And in these rankings, I wanted to do, kind of a start-sit thing, but I don't want to call them start-sits necessarily. So they're fades, guys that I'm willing to fade, and guys that I love for one reason or another. And there will be pretty much one of each. A couple of other things. I'll also give you a couple of DFS guys who I'm high on especially compared to the ECR. Let's get started. And that's what this column is over here, is where am I compared to the ECR with my rankings. So obviously Travis Kelce is the tight end number 1. Mark Andrews, tight end number 2. I do have a couple of concerns for Mark Andrews week 1 here. A little bit anxious to see what we get out of him. He has been battling some injuries this offseason that we don't really know how serious they are or are not for sure at this point in time. And so new offense and everything. I think it could be a little bit of a bummer week 1, maybe nothing huge for Mark Andrews, but you're starting him. Same with TJ Hawkinson. Well, not the same with TJ. I'm very excited about TJ this week. Wouldn't be surprised if he outscores a Mark Andrews. Going up against Tampa Bay, I think that that could be a solid game for that offense, and TJ Hawkinson should be a part of it if so. Darren Waller going up against Dallas. I like the matchup here quite a bit. Darren Waller is not a guy who I've had highly drafted in my preseason rankings, But week one here, I'm on board with him compared to especially some of the guys immediately behind him and their matchups going up against Dallas. Yes, it's a good defense, but it's also an offense that should put up some points on the board and give the New York Giants, reason to keep passing. Then Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, I do have flipped compared to the experts on average, and this really came down to the Vegas lines and which offense compared these defenses I view pretty similar coming into the season here. So which offense do I think is going to have a better chance of getting their players a touchdown? And so that's going to be the Philadelphia offense. So I just like that opportunity a little bit higher than for George Kittle. Both teams are expected to be playing from ahead. I believe the scoring line, though, is just a little bit higher for Philadelphia. Over-under. So that will bring us to our next 7 tight ends, starting off with Kyle Pitts going up against Carolina. I'd love to put him higher, but there are some concerns about him coming into the season, just with the speed that it looks like he's playing at in the preseason. So that is a little bit concerning. And going up against Carolina is just really not expected to be a high-scoring game, and that's my biggest issue with basically all of these Atlanta playmakers is something that goes back to last season, too, with this offense. Touchdowns are pretty important in fantasy football. They can make a player, especially at the tight end position, from being average to great. I want to see it from this Atlanta offense before I go ahead and start actually ranking Kyle Pitts higher, but I'm optimistic about it, just not sure about it. Then we have David Njoku, Tyler Higbee, and Pat Freiermuth all jumping Evan Ingram, so we will get to Evan Ingram. He is obviously my fade here in this light orange color, and each of these guys going up 1 spot, which ends up leading Evan Ingram to have fallen 3 spots. This grouping I find kind of similar, maybe a tier of their own here with these guys. And Cleveland going up against Cincinnati, the Los Angeles Rams going up against Seattle. I like those matchups as far as keeping these offenses in passing situations all game long. So that's a positive for me for these compared to going up against San Francisco. Defense for Pat Freiermuth. And we'll get to this Indianapolis-Jacksonville one, even though we are expecting Jacksonville to be able to put up some points and whoop up on Indy pretty decently. That brings its own concerns for me. Pat Freiermuth, I feel comfortable with him, but I don't feel great about him going up against San Francisco this week. Could be a tough matchup, could be tough sledding. The chances of him finding the end zone, I think, are a little bit tough. But where I ended up putting him up against Evan Ingram is that I do think that at least Pittsburgh will remain in a passing situation all game, whereas Evan Ingram, a guy who I'm already concerned about the consistency for, is in a matchup where I expect Jacksonville to be able to rely on their running game pretty heavily. I think this has a good chance to be a good week for their running backs. And so that's going to mean that Evan Ingram has to be one of, I think, 2 receivers to have a good game. There's 4 guys there to be concerned about, 50-50 shot. Don't expect him to remain in a tight game, in a passing situation all game long. So I'm just a little bit hesitant towards Evan Ingram and the opportunities in this game that will be afforded to them. The only player here that I think out of the top, players ranked ahead of Evan Ingram that you might have on your team as well would most likely, I believe, be Tyler Higbee. And so when it comes to those two, if you have to make that decision, I would make that decision based on what your team needs this week. Do you need a high floor or do you need a high ceiling? And maybe if your team has any players going, if your opponent has any players going Thursday night, or if you both have players going, that could help determine that situation. But otherwise, you're just going to have to go based off of projections or based off of how you feel. And so if you feel like you're playing against a better team week 1 here, I would go with Evan Ingram and just hope for him to be the receiver to get a touchdown or 2 and get some good yardage. Otherwise, if you think that you're in a good situation, I would go Tyler Higbee. I think he has a lower chance of busting, especially without Cooper Kupp being there. His floor is insanely high, but then his ceiling's a little bit lower without Cooper Kupp. So there's another factor to keep in mind for Tyler Higbee. I'm not expecting, I did this ranking really not expecting Cooper Kupp to be playing, though. And then Chig Okonkwo, we'll actually go 1 spot lower here. Chig Okonkwo, Cole Kmet, I also have flipped compared to the ECR. And I'm really just kind of going for the upside here with Chig Okonkwo going up against New Orleans. Expect New Orleans offense to look pretty darn solid. And Chicago Green Bay game, I'm not really sure what to expect. I think the most likely outcome is like 21-17 or like 20-17, more like that. Not expecting it to be a high-scoring game, but I also could see either team kind of blowing out the other team. I think that's possible. So I think Tennessee-New Orleans is a higher-scoring game. I believe I basically went with the Las Vegas lines on this one, which were in line with my thoughts there. So I'll take the upside for Chig over Cole Kmet. But if you did have both of these two, you can make the similar kind of decision as between Evan Ingram and Tyler Higbee. But I do lean towards Chig Okonkwo this week. So let's look at my final 18 tight ends to wrap this video up, or before we wrap the video up. Starting off with, we'll start off with Dalton Schultz here at tight end 14. No difference in ECR. However, I will say there's a decent chance that I will be moving Gerald Everett ahead of Dalton Schultz. Looked at it again this morning, made these lineups yesterday, made my rankings yesterday, and I'm feeling like this is just too sweet to pass up here. The only thing is I'm not super high on Baltimore's defense in week one. I have some injuries. I'm a little bit concerned about how good it actually will be or not. But anyways, expect the Los Angeles Chargers, Miami Dolphins game to be very high scoring. And I expect, especially early season, I think is where Gerald Everett might find the most success on this offense while they're getting used to the new offense and bringing on a rookie wide receiver who may not be the starting third wide receiver to begin the season in Quentin Johnston, but I'm sure they will be working him in regardless and will eventually win that job if he doesn't have it week one. Those are the things that lead me to think that week one here, Gerald Everett going up against Miami could have a really, really good day. He's close to being a love for me, but I'm going to give you a dark horse love here in Sam Laporta. If he had a +4 like Irv Smith here, I would have given him a green, but we're just going to call it a dark horse love here because I am on par with the experts at the end of the day with where I'm ranking him. But another guy who I'll give you a couple of DFS options. He could be a good, solid DFS option if you would like him, going up against Kansas City. I think that Detroit's going to come into this game and give Kansas City their all. I don't think that means it'll be enough to win the game, but I think that they're going to try. I think they're going to scare Kansas City at least for a little bit in this game. And so I think that Sam Laporta has an opportunity to have one heck of a first game to his NFL season here in week one. Then Irv Smith Jr. Stars don't necessarily align here as much as I like him over some other guys that are ranked higher than him according to ECR. And it just comes down to I know what I'm getting with Irv Smith, and I like the upside of being in the Cincinnati offense. Do expect this Cleveland defense to be pretty good this year, but if there's ever a week where a defense with a lot of new pieces might not be up to par yet, it's going to be week one. It's a divisional game. I don't like AFC North divisional games for fantasy points. They tend to play each other real tough, but Cincinnati offense, and heck, in a tough game, that'll keep Cincinnati scoring a lot, so that would actually maybe not, or passing a lot, so that may not make it the worst case scenario. I just feel pretty comfortable giving a shot to Irv Smith this week. I'm going to take a shot at that upside over a couple of other situations like Juwan Johnson, Greg Dulcich, Dalton Kincaid, Hayden Hurst. So for Hayden Hurst, it comes down to the quarterback and the offense and the expected points in this game. I'll take Irv Smith over Hayden Hurst. Greg Dulcich, Dalton Kincaid, we don't know how they're going to be utilized yet. There's too much of an unknown there, whereas we know Irv Smith is going to be on the field, down in and down out. Those guys are not going to be on the field as much. That's almost a guarantee. I want to wait and see on those types of guys. And then Juwan Johnson, I've just kind of been down on him. I'm expecting him to not be on the field as much as, a lot of these starting tight end guys. I do think that their backup tight end, although in week one I think there's a less chance of it, is a better receiving tight end, and we'll get some opportunities in the receiving game. And then you also have Taysom Hill that could come in and steal some work. So I'm not so sure about the consistency for Juwan Johnson. But this week he did make it into my top 18 because there are some of those Greg Dulcich, Dalton Kincaid questionable situations going up against Tennessee. I like that offense for New Orleans. So yeah, I'm willing to take a shot on Juwan Johnson week 1 here, if need be. Now, a couple of guys right behind Juwan Johnson I just couldn't put ahead of him, but I really want to, who I think are going to be great DFS options to give a shot on this week, are first up going to be Cade Otton going up against Minnesota. He is my 19th ranked tight end. I think that's a game where the Tampa Bay is going to be passing a lot. I think Minnesota. I think it would be a pretty high-scoring game, especially from the Minnesota side, and hopefully for the likes of a Cade Otton or any other players that you have. Same with the Tampa Bay side for fantasy purposes. But, yeah, Minnesota should keep them on their toes all game. That's a good, darn good offense, and so I think there will be a lot of passing opportunity for Cade Otton to soak up. I like him at his price. I have him 13 spots ahead of ECR. I would take a shot on him season long, even if you really faded your tight ends, and he's one of the guys you put your trust in. Number 20, tight end 20 in my rankings, Luke Musgrave going up against Chicago. So it's not the Minnesota matchup. That's why I have him behind Cade Otton. I have him 8 spots ahead of ECR. I like Luke Musgrave because for the same reason, like I like an Irv Smith Jr. compared to some of those names like Greg Dulcich, Dalton Kincaid. He's going to be on the field a lot. It was very clear in this offseason that he is a part of this offense's plan. I like the floor opportunity, and I like the ceiling potential for based on his skill set and the quarterback skill set too with deep ball throwing. So, and what we've seen in the offseason. Jordan Love has definitely liked Luke Musgrave this offseason. So I feel pretty comfortable with Luke Musgrave this week. And I think if I'm going for a ceiling shot for DFS, though, I'll go Cade Otton. I think he is a little bit more expensive, though. So both good options. Now, that is it for my tight end rankings. I will come out, obviously, with the other positional rankings later on in this week. Just getting this video out nice and early for you. I hope you had a nice weekend. And before we head out, I do have some lineup questions for you. So I drafted Cooper Kupp, not expecting him to play. I really hope he doesn't for purposes of I'd rather have, I don't want him to get re-injured more. And I'd like him to be 100% once I get to him. So I would like to know who your favorite 2 receivers out of these 3, and I actually threw in a 4th receiver here that I do have on my team. So Tyler Lockett is going up against the Rams, Jahan Dotson going up against the Cardinals, Brandon Ayuk going up against the Steelers, and then I do have Marvin Mims going up with the Raiders. So feel free to rank those. Either give me your favorite 2 out of them, most preferably in order, just in case Cooper Kupp does play. Tyler Lockett, Jahan Dotson, Brandon Ayuk, Marvin Mims. Rank them, your top 3, 1, 2, 3 for me, please. And who should I start as my RB2? I've got a hot matchup decision between Raheem Mostert, who's going up against the Chargers, and Samaje Perine, who is going up against the Raiders. So it's a nice matchup for Samaje Perine, but man, we have Devon Achane and what's his name? Jeff Wilson Jr. is on IR. Devon Achane's coming back from injury. He is returning to practice as of today, I believe. And then you have Salvon Ahmed. Why can't I think of his name? That little running back who's been with Miami forever. Salvon Ahmed? Good God. He has like a neck injury. So that, I think like Raheem Mostert's in line week 1 here to really get the rock quite a bit at a high percentage, at a high rate in a game that I think is going to be high scoring. So I really like Raheem Mostert this week quite a bit. Let me know what you think. I understand going Samaje over Raheem. And finally, do you think maybe I should play Raheem Mostert and Samaje Perine and then sit one of those wide receivers, not play Jahan Dotson if you like Tyler Lockett the most, or etc. Let me know if you think I should get both of them on the field over my wide receiver options at that flex spot. Thank you very much for joining me, and good luck this season. Let's roll.